You're listening to Always Player One, a solo board gaming podcast.
Hello and welcome to Always Player One. I'm Scruffy.
And I'm Norm, and today we're going to be talking about the Wars of Marcus Aurelius. The Wars of Marcus Aurelius is a really interesting solitaire-only war game published by Hollenspiel. And I'm very, very interested specifically to know what Scruffy thinks about this one, because this, as long-time listeners will know, is one of my favourite solo games. So very, very excited to dive in. Before we do, though, we have a quick announcement.
Yes, so we are, as you may have noticed, back to a monthly release schedule. The last episode was a month ago, and here we are 1 month hence with this new episode. That's going to carry on for the foreseeable future. We went over this in our behind-the-scenes Patreon-exclusive planning phase, where you can hear all about it from us and hear the reasons behind it, if you're interested to find that out. We also announced it on our social media, our Discord, so links to all of that are in the description.
Yeah, we also updated the Facebook page as well with regards to this. So as Scruffy said, the links to all of that are in the description.
Cool. Well, now that's out of the way, let's dive straight into a description of the Wars of Marcus Aurelius. What is this game that we are looking at today, Norm?
The Wars of Marcus Aurelius is, as I said, a solitaire-only war game. Now, it's a card-driven war game, meaning you're going to either play cards from your hand, either for the event, the specific text that's on it, or for any of the sort of basic actions that you can do by just spending any card. Now, in this game, you take on the role of Marcus Aurelius, the last of the 5 good Roman emperors, and you'll be attempting to make 3 Germanic tribes that you are at war with surrender and stay surrendered. There are many ways that you can lose, only one way you can win, as I've already described. The ways you can lose is you can be usurped, you can have one particular tribe make its way all the way down to Rome, or you can run out of time. The way the game works is it's played over several rounds, and each round is divided into 3 seasons. During each season, you will get given a number of cards. 5 to begin with, then 3, and then 1. So as the rounds continue, and as the phases of each round continues, you'll have diminishing returns and depleted resources to deal with the oncoming threats of these Germanic tribes. The way it works specifically is the map is divided into 3 sections, one for each tribe. They will make their way towards you on their turns, and that is once again card-driven. Each time you have taken a turn, you will also flip over 3 cards for the enemy, and they can do a whole host of things, but normally it involves the tribes getting closer to you, ruining your forts, and just generally making life difficult for you as Marcus Aurelius. At the end of the round, you'll then lose any cards that you haven't spent, unless, of course, you've meditated. You can also meditate in order to reserve a card for the following round, but that is a limited effect. It's not something you'll be doing it all the time. I think that's pretty much it, right? You play cards, you force the tribes back, they come back at you on their turn, you keep going until one of you wins or loses. I mean, there's not much more to it, right, Scruffy?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is the way the territory control works in the game is it is just based on those 3 sections. Even though they have distinct spaces that the barbarians move down, you only assign your armies to each third of the board at the start of the year or round, and then at the end of the year, at the beginning of the next year, you can move them around. Or if you've built an upgrade or 2 between the segments, the fleets they're called, then you can move your troops around a bit more freely during the year.
But they will only be at the bottom, so you will assume to always be in the same space as the enemy if you choose to battle. There's no sort of tactical movement in this game. Is that what you're getting at, Scruffy?
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So whether they're on their home tile or whether they're right up against Rome on the space adjacent, if you've got armies in that third of the board, you can kick them back.
Hopefully, right?
You can fight them. You can fight and leave yourself up to the gods of chance as this game.
And I think you're right there, Scruffy. There is a lot of dice rolling in this game. And one thing I said in the last episode when I was talking about why it's one of my favourite solo games of all time is that the dice in this game are absolutely brutal. That's something that
Mhm.
I love, but I'm gonna set out my stall right at the beginning, and we haven't discussed it, but I don't think you would have got on with that particular aspect of the game.
Well, I'm going to, right at the top of the episode here, reveal all and say that Marcus Aurelius is one of my least favorite solo board games that I have ever played.
Oof, a dagger to
Oh,
my heart, Scruffy.
sorry, Norm. Et too scruffy, I know, but it was a real challenge for me to try and understand the joy in this game, and I'm really excited to hear where you come from with it, and kind of have our different opinions stacked up next to each other here, because we obviously both come out from a completely different perspective,
Very
and
different
and it's the
perspective.
same game, and yeah, that's really exciting for me. And I've also got a few broader topics I really want to touch on, so I don't want to spend all episode with you guys just whining and complaining about every little thing I don't like about this game. But I think it's important to talk about what it is that rubs me the wrong way with it, and hear from you about why you like it so much.
Yeah, I was about to say, and reversely, I'm more than happy to share my enthusiasm for what I think is a really clever and fun system.
We'll have to play Angel and Devil this game. We are the barbarians, and you can be Marcus Aurelius on this one.
Perfect.
Right. Okay. So where should we start with all this?
Okay, well, we've already touched on the combat in this game, and
Yeah.
I feel like this is going to be the biggest divider. I think right at the beginning, people will know whether it's a game for them or not based
Mm.
on how that works, because it is very swingy. So I think we should unpack that to begin with, if you like, Scruffy.
Sure. That's great. So we're talking, I think, generally here about the randomness in the game, right? That's the kind of the
Yeah,
broad
yeah, sure. The level
topic
of
here.
randomness in the
The
game.
level of random, and there is a lot of randomness in the game. I would say it dips over into being too much. It's for me just chaos, this game. And the combat's an example of that. And on its own, I think the combat in this game mechanically would work fine, but within the context of the rest of the game and all the other mechanics that invite randomness, it tips over into being too much. So the way combat works is, you, at the start of the year, like we say, set out your legions, and you'll probably, if you're like me, just dump them all in one place, because you've got a limited number of actions. So you're going to dump all your legions in the place you want to just steamroll over that turn. And then you've got a second army off on one of the other fronts. One of the fronts you'll probably just completely ignore. If you're anything like me, I don't know, maybe there is a sound argument for trying to divide them thinly over the three fronts, but yeah. So once you've chosen how you want to lay them out, however you want to lay them out, and you've chosen which army you want to fight against the barbarians with, all you do is you look at the terrain value, you look at the barbarians' number, which they'll either be bold or demoralized, so it'll be a big number or a little number, usually a swing of plus or minus 2 there, and that's their starting score. Then for your starting score, you look at how many legions you have, maximum of 6, plus your leader bonus, which is a maximum of plus 3, and any forts you've got on that tile, which is a maximum of plus 2, plus 1 or plus 2. And then once you've looked at that baseline, you just roll a d6 for both armies, for yours and for the barbarians, and add that to the baseline score. Highest number wins. If it's a tie, you keep rolling. You get one little caveat where you can spend a card to get +1 on your roll to make it either a win or a draw if you're just under, which is kind of cool. And if you win, the barbarian army retreats. If you lose, you lose. The barbarian army stays where it is. You lose, obviously, the actions you've invested to take that fight, because you have to initiate fights in this game.
By spending a card, like anything else you do in this game. Spoiler, that's how you do any action.
Yep. The barbarians never initiate fights. They always just advance down to Rome to try and move into Rome uncontested. And you also lose a troop or one of your forts. So that's obviously a very random and swingy fight. And I when I first started playing, I thought, I can get behind that. It's fun just rolling it, trying to eke out a +1 or +2. You get this one sort of fundamental choice throughout the game, but it is the only choice you get throughout the game, which is attack now or act now, or delay for a turn and try and give yourself a +1 or +2 advantage. And that's it. That's the core choice running throughout the entire game. So yeah, I mean, in terms of that randomness, I was kind of at that point okay and on board with it. I guess it's something you really enjoy, right, Norm?
I actually kind of had the opposite thing because I was irked by it at the start, and
Really?
then I became okay with it. I became okay with it because things started to level out. I started to win as many fights as I was losing. I started to become lucky.
My first roll of my first game, I went to you on Discord, didn't I, Norm? I'd set
Mhm.
up, set everything out, just read the rules, put the rule book down, went, okay, I'm going to attack. First action, I'm going to attack. Actually, no, I built a fort first to give myself that +1. Then I was, okay, now I'm going to attack. And I rolled a 1 and a 6, but the worst it could be. 6 for the barbarians, 1 for me. And that was like the only roll that would have been a loss, I think, when I added it all up. It was yeah, it was quite a special moment of this game's rubbish, and that's why I've got this opinion, right?
And yeah, I had a similar thing where I was like, "Oh, this is so swingy. I don't like it," because you do invest actions in, trying to get a numerical advantage, but it's very difficult, especially when you get to latter stages of the game, where the way in which you make a tribe surrender is you make them retreat several steps until they get to their homeland, and then
Mm,
you defeat them on their homeland, and their homeland has the highest terrain advantage for them. And it's very difficult to combat that, when they've got like a passive +8, you know, especially
mhm.
if they're not demoralized. You could be looking at they have a +12 before you roll any dice. That can be challenging to overcome.
Yeah, because you're limited to, like I said, 6 legionaries and 1 leader, so that's 9 plus 2 from the fort, 10, 11. So you're always going to be kind of playing at a disadvantage on those unless you have a very powerful card to help you.
Yes, and there are some of those cards in the game which I think are lovely. It's great to sort of plan towards those. But one thing I really liked about this is it is quite lucky, it is quite swingy, and I thought it was very exciting to play. That's the word I'm going to be using a lot. Everything about this game I find very accessible and exciting. This is a very easy game to learn, and specifically the luck on the battling. And I will call it luck. I often, when I hear people say luck, I often think, you mean randomness, right? You mean randomness. You're just
Yeah.
okay with randomness. You've got to hang up. But I will call it luck here because it is very swingy. Like you said, you rolled a 1 and they rolled a 6, and that can happen. And you'll be surprised how many times stuff like that does happen in this game. But I think it's all a part of what makes it exciting when you think, right, I've built up towards this thing and I still don't know if I'm going to succeed or not. Now, you'll know after I've said that sentence if this is a game for you or not. If you're like me and you think, wow, that sounds really fun, then this is a game for you. Immediately, if I've said that and you've gone, wow, well, hold on, I don't want to, have my plans ruined by, a twist of fate, Jeff Hardy style, then, well, that's this isn't going to be a game for you. I have to be honest; it's just not.
Yeah, and to build on that there, I mean, I think for me the thing that does it is, and I used to be the sort of person that would say no, that hard no on that. But I think I've become a lot more okay with randomness
Yeah,
in board games over playing a lot of solo games and seeing it done really well, or ways that I really engage with. But in this, the problem is that there is never a mitigation. You will never reach a point where to make them surrender you can have a guarantee or even just an improved state from the kind of maximum you can get, which still relies on that luck. And so, even if you've done everything and got everything in place that you could possibly get, you've invested the time, you've said, okay, I'm going to delay. I've taken that core choice of act now and risk it at a disadvantage, or delay and act at an advantage. So I've waited, wasted my time, bided my time. The barbarians haven't scuppered my plans, and we'll get to that in a minute. And now I'm ready to act, and you act, and then you're left with this random roll still, this luck roll. And if you fail that luck roll, it's just basically a miss a turn because you have something knocked out. One of your forts knocked down, or one of your legions is put in the reserve, and so you have to now prepare again, invest more actions to try again, or risk it and try again at even more of a disadvantage if you have the actions still available to do
that's
that.
that's a very exciting proposition. Just going again.
But the problem then is that you're still relying on the exact same
Oh,
luck.
yeah. Oh, of course,
And
yeah.
this can happen in infinite.
Yeah.
The only time I lost was Marcus Aurelius was because it felt like I was walking through treacle. No, it's like that Greek myth of Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the hill, only to just have it roll straight back down again and no progress be made. And it just felt like I was bashing my head against a brick wall, and I just got so cross with it. And I couldn't understand how this could be fun for anyone. But tell me about it, Norm. What's fun about that torture?
Well, I love how punishing the dice are. I'll be honest with you. I think it's
quick, just bring you up on that word punishing. What are they punishing?
yeah, like absolutely nothing.
They're punishing you for putting in all the effort.
No, absolutely, and I can't sit here and say that that's not the case because that is the case oftentimes. To give you an idea of how desperate you are in combat situations, sometimes there's a card that exists which is called single combat, which is where
Mhm.
thematically your champion in your army can challenge their champion, and you just have a roll off, no pluses for terrain, no pluses for your army. And oftentimes that card is really, really helpful. That's an idea of how difficult it is sometimes to win combat, especially making them surrender. But how exciting is this? Like my second game of the Wars of Marcus Aurelius, I managed to win. And the last combat of the game, getting the final tribe to surrender, was by single combat. So there's just nothing else I can do. I'm at this point now where I've done everything I can, and maybe I'll be able to recuperate in the next round or whatever. I've still got some time, but it really felt like now or never, and I don't know why. I think the system creates these moments really organically, and I had them on their home hex, and I had a couple of cards left, but one of them was single combat, and I was like, I'm just going to play it. And it just came down to no preparation, just who can roll off highest.
Yeah.
And I won. I rolled a 5, they rolled a 3, or something like that. And I won. And I remember thinking, wow, that is such a cool moment in the game where the whole war just depended on my champion versus their champion in single combat. And I could see this whole scene in my head. It felt so thematic. And that's one thing I think the game does really well. And you probably disagree with this. It sounds like you think it's a boring luck fest with that's like rolling a boulder up a hill. But I think the game is wonderfully thematic and it creates, like I said, it creates these moments really organically through the sort of quote unquote luck and the sort of random elements. And I think the cards are really, and I'd like to move on and discuss the cards because I think they're fantastic. And it sounds like you have some opinions on how the barbarians work, which is also card driven. So I'm sure we can unpack that next as well. That's kind of one of the reasons why I think it's a marvelous system, and that's specific to the random element and the dice rolling. Obviously, I'll come on to more. I think the game has a wonderful arc as well. I think it manages itself really well like that. But we'll come on to that in due time. But for now, Scruffy, what you mentioned that you sort of had an issue with how the barbarians can mess you up. What do you think about the sort of card play in the game and how the barbarians respond to your card play as well?
Well, I'm really glad we hit on the cards here because it's a massive thing I want to address as soon as possible. And I just want to talk about the single combat card because there's only one in the Roman deck, the single combat card, and it's kind of in a lot of ways indicative of how the design of the card really irks me. So I'll get onto that in a minute. But just I had the exact same sort of story beat as you, and it was the game that I lost where I just went, okay, if I lose this fight, I'll lose 2 Imperium points, and that'll make me lose the game. But if I win this fight, then I'll finally have that one clan out of the way. It wouldn't have ended the game and won it for me, but I was just sick of that clan not dying and knocking all my forts got wiped out in the barbarians turns, and I was just like, you know what, I just want them out of the way, and if they don't not get knocked out of the way right now, then I'm happy to stop playing because I'm sick of this. So I played that card for that reason, and I lost that fight. And I think in terms of as a story beat, that was kind of the highlight for me. One of the really nice moments where it was like, yep, and that's it. I finally had a say and just like, okay, I'm happy to lose at this point and get me out of this game. But it is only one card in the entire deck of what looks to be about 40 cards. I haven't actually counted. But yeah, so in terms of the general card design, it is another example of chaos in the game.
Oh, yes.
Both the barbarians and the Roman cards are the swingiest decks I have ever encountered in a board game. Some of the barbarian cards do incredibly good things for you. Some of them do good things in certain contexts. Some of them do neutral to slightly good or slightly bad things. Some of them do really bad things. Some of them do really bad things in some contexts. And it just feels like it just happens kind of at random. And there's also cards in there that shuffle the deck, shuffle the discard back into the deck for both of them.
Yes.
But the barbarian one happens kind of randomly. So theoretically, you could hit all of the worst cards, have them shuffled back in. Or, and I should say this as well, because I think it's important to say, I don't only dislike this game when I'm having a bad time and losing. Most of the time when I was playing, I was winning, I was steamrolling the game, but I was still not having a good time because I didn't feel like I earned any of that victory. It all happened because in my first game, I got just tons of really nice barbarian cards, and then they all got shuffled back in. So I didn't really see any of the bad ones. I was like,
we like those games, Scruffy. I don't know what you're talking about.
I personally found it just incredibly boring because it's like, all right, that was easy street. I didn't get to play a game with crunchy decisions. I got just a victory handed to me. I think it's also worth mentioning with the cards that I found the wording on them to be a bit inconsistent and confusing at times. There's a couple of examples I could give. Like one uses the term the Danube front, and
Yes.
I had to get you to look that one up for me. And the designers even acknowledged that was a bit of a mistake on the card. But it happens throughout. There's another one, just to give you an example here. Each of the three factions has the barbarian tribes has a kind of general advance them forward one space or flip them from their demoralized side. That's kind of the standard card you'll get for each of them. And there's loads of them in the deck. But the Quadi have a special rule on theirs, which is to do with if they're in a truce or if they've surrendered, then you do something different. And so that made me really worried, like, oh, and this is just because of the wording. The wording on it is secret aid. And that specific wording tells me that this is a rules aid to help remind me of a rule that's I should have learned from the rule book, but it's not in the rule book. And it doesn't apply to the other tribes. But I was really worried when I was learning the game, does that rule apply to the other tribes? And it's just been printed on this one card. I know that sounds really nitpicky, but it really took me out of the moment. And it's kind of indicative to me of a lot of the card, a lot of the design choices. They don't feel premeditated. They don't feel like nuanced. They feel sloppy. I give one more example before I let you come to its defense here, Norm. But there's one card for the Romans that is you can take 2 Imperium points, or you can draw 2 cards. Why on earth would you ever just take Imperium points? It's bad design because
you can spend cards for Imperium points anyway.
Exactly.
So you might as well draw to see what you get, and then if you don't like it, you can always just spend those 2 cards.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So that's kind of, these are just some examples. I won't go into detail on every single card, but it just feels like really, really badly thought out times, and it feels to me like the game, it's not cleverly designed. It's sloppily designed, and that's really problematic when it's compounded with this too much chaos factor of the game. It just makes me, it's like playing an RP with a bad GM or or a badly thought out solo RP. You just throw your hands up and go, this is nonsense. That's what happened for me.
Yeah, I can't help but agree with some of the wording, especially the Danube front one. So the River Danube is sort of going through the main map, and certain cards refer to the Danube front.
Yeah, it's one card. It's called the
Rain Miracle or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting card because obviously it refers to a real historic event, as many of the cards do, which I find is the saving grace for a lot of the cards. But it refers to the Danube front. So you think, okay, what's the Danube front? Well, it's not in the rulebook. So you have to check BGG FAQs. And you find on BGG FAQs, it just means the map, the main map, because there are something off-map called off-map conflicts, and that's very clearly defined. It's an off-map conflict. It's a conflict that's not happening on the map. It's not called a off Danube front
Yeah,
conflict.
exactly.
So I find that really confusing because the rulebook doesn't define it. The off-map conflicts are called off-map conflicts.
Yep, and all the other cards, when they refer to specifically this can be used off map or this can't be used off map, that's how they refer
It's
to
always
it.
referring to map or off-map,
So this is what I'm saying about
or
inconsistencies.
rather reversely, just referring to off-map. So you would assume that the opposite of off-map is map, but you would
Yeah,
assume wrong. It's Danube front, and that's
yeah.
never pointed out anywhere useful. So I can't help but agree with you there, Scruffy.
And just on that specific card, it's another example. So, a lot of the Roman cards are just this is an action card, action card, action card, just play an action. So basically, you have to use this as an action. Some of them have minor effects that are okay. This one, it says, and I think this might make some of our listeners kind of grok what I'm getting at with the when I say that it seems sloppy. It seems immature, I guess. It says automatically win the battle you are fighting, do not roll, and gain 1 Imperium point. Danube front only. So this means you can anywhere on the map, except in their home tiles, it says you can't do it on the home space to make them surrender. You can just win a fight just by paying this card. Win a fight and gain an LP, which is an action for a card. So that's a wild swing, isn't it? To me, that seems just weirdly thought out.
To me, I really enjoy that some cards are very powerful.
Hmm.
And the reason I enjoy that specifically is for a couple of reasons. One is because I believe the game is quite hard anyway. And the other reason is because I like that the game allows you to get into weird moments. I like the way the game makes you think about your hand of cards. I like that sometimes you have to think very carefully about what you want to spend as an action point, and other times you don't because you get a nice break because you get a hand of just action cards. And you could say that's detracting from your agency, but not at all because I feel like there's actually a lot of actions that you can do and it's still very interesting.
Oh, for sure. I think if you have a hand of action cards, those are the best hands because you get to choose now. It's when
Yes.
you get these powerful cards, it takes away your choice because you've suddenly got a card that says you have to play this card.
When do I use this card? And sometimes you won't get a good enough time and you'll have to meditate on it and you think, will I ever? And then you start getting tempted into, oh, is it just going to be an action card? Obviously,
That's a fair response.
and I think it's very interesting, and it's a nice dilemma that it puts you in as a player. I always feel when I play the Wars of Marcus Aurelius that I'm always functioning off of the bare minimum. And even when you're given cards like that, which situationally excellent, you always want to maximize those cards. And actually, because of the swingy nature of the barbarian deck and the luck of the dice, because your planning might not go your way, you might not get the luxury of using that card for its most effective use. You might have to use it on a terrain value that is actually very winnable anyway because some nonsense has happened somewhere else. And I think that's a lovely dilemma that it puts you in as a player. I really like being pushed up against the wall like that and being told, give me all your lunch money.
It's definitely a game for masochists for sure.
Even when you've got a fantastic, like a game breaking card in your hand, because of the other swinginess, you'll find that oftentimes it's not that. And I have used that specific card you're talking about, I have used it just as an action point before
Really?
for those exact reasons. And I think that's when the game, if we speak about all these elements of randomness in isolation, and you break it down into its bare bones, you could say, and that is why it's too random. I think the way it all comes together leads to very interesting decision spaces, and like I said, very organic moments of interesting story bites, especially because a lot of the cards are based on real historical events, and especially because I'm rambling a little bit, but I just think it's a wonderful design.
Yeah, well, should we talk a bit about the theme? Because I think that might also be a bit of a barrier to my enjoyment of the game. Because I think for a lot of these war games, the immersion in the theme is kind of a requirement to have a fun time. And I think personally, I wasn't able to get lost in the story of pretending I'm Marcus Aurelius fighting off the barbarians. I wasn't able to lose myself in the kind of push and pull of that and enjoy it. For me, it became a kind of mathematical treacle. That's what it was. It was just a number treacle. It was essentially modifiers. It was just a game of plus ones and plus twos, not a game of barbarians and Romans. So for you, did the theme kind of speak to you and make you have enjoy it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It really come through on some of the cards, especially some of the both the Roman and the barbarian cards actually. Like the there's a card that's just called Oh Faustina,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and if you don't know, that was Marcus Aurelius's wife, and she was caught up in a number of public embarrassments.
I
And
didn't know that.
you didn't know that, and that made me laugh every time I pulled it because it's Faustina, what have you done this time? And it loses you an Imperium point, which is what basically tracks your public perception in Rome. And it's just kind of the last thing you need when you're in the middle of a war and then you're like, she did what now?
Yeah, yeah. No, I get that. I get that.
And yeah, the way it comes across is great, but I think you do need to know a little bit about the history. And I think the way the cards
Mm,
are written made me interested enough to go and find these things out myself because I didn't know it before playing. I think that speaks a
that's so
lot.
cool.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to how much the theme spoke to me. But you're saying you had the opposite effect.
Well, yeah, and I think this just goes to show the kind of different mindsets coming in. I was coming in to play a board game and have some crunchy decisions, and I was kind of almost told off by the rule book because when I got that Danube card, the first thing I did, and when I was reading the rules, I saw there's a glossary at the back with each of the cards listed. So I was like, "Oh, brilliant! There's a problem. I don't understand this card. I'll reference it in the rule book." I love when rule books do this, and they have clarification rules in the rule book to explain the cards, but that's not what that was. It, in, the back of the rulebook doesn't have a clarification for each of the cards. It has basically flavor text for each of
Yeah.
the cards.
Yeah,
It gives
brilliant.
you, it contextualizes them in some sort of historical way. So if we look at the Faustina scandal card now, let's do it live. It says Marcus's wife was the target of scandalous rumors of poisoning, adultery, and even treason. Some claim that Commodus was the result of a test between Faustina and a gladiator.
Now, Commodus is Marcus Aurelius' son and was his successor to the Roman Empire after his death, for
Now
context.
that's a brilliant little bit of flavor text there. Lovely little resource for you to look at. But it didn't help me when I went looking for the cards and clarification on what the Danube front meant in the book, in the rule book. So yeah, I mean, I think as a kind of a sightseeing tour, then I can quite see this being a way to kind of nerd out on the Roman Empire and that time and learn a few bits or get a few sort of nuggets of what's all this. And I'm genuinely interested in researching that now that I know about that stuff. That's a cool storyline, and having a game where you're experiencing that and you're experiencing a personal reaction to this historical event. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? That's pretty fun.
It's very cool, and I think that's the kind of mindset you have
Yeah.
to go in with. I think, like I've already described, one way in which I think decisions are crunchy enough for me anyway. But I think, yeah, it's very much a simulation. You know, it's a simulation. One thing I think, and I'd be interested to know your thoughts on this as well, Scruffy. I don't mean to derail the conversation a little bit,
Mhm.
but I felt, because there's no tactical movement with your armies, I felt like this game lent itself more to the feeling of like a firefighting co-op game, like a
Right.
Pandemic or a Flashpoint or something. I always felt like, oh no, this tribe's really kicking off, or they've had a really big turn because that really swinging card. Now I need to go do something about that next round, or on my next turn, let's change my plans. I need to go and react to this now. And I thought that was quite interesting because I do think it keeps that card-driven war game feel. But yeah, much more than something like the Ming Voyages that we played, or the Coin Tribes Revolt, the other sort of war games that we've covered on the show, or Pax Pamir even as a historical game. This game felt much more like I have to quickly react to this because this fire's just gone off here, and I have to rebuild my forts because they've all been wiped out, and that can legit happen. You can, there's that
Mhm.
one card that makes you do a fort check, right? Horrible card, absolutely horrible card, and I think it forces you to have to go and react to that. I think if you like those kind of firefighty co-op games where different things are appearing on the map at different times, and you have to sort of rush to go and deal with the latest emergency. I think the Wars of Marcus Aurelius gives off that vibe. I was wondering what if you picked up on that at all, or what you think of it now I've pointed out to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thought, isn't it? I think there's kind of a few problems with seeing it that way for me. So I think the best versions of those games allow you to react to stuff happening and move around. This game, in order to move between the fronts, you need to invest cards, which are also what you would then use to move between the fronts. And then
Mhm.
you'd also need to spend cards to have cards left over to fight. So it kind of discourages you from moving anything. It's like you say, it's not a tactical game in that you don't get much movement unless you really invest heavily in it and waste time doing it. But when it comes to other stuff like having to rebuild forts and stuff, you do have to do that. But the kind of flip side to that again is it's stuff that you've probably either just done or you did maybe a round ago. So it's just essentially undoing your progress, and then you have to redo your progress. So it kind of, yeah, I guess in some ways that feels similar to in a game like Flashpoint where a fire starts, but it's very rare that in those games a fire starts, you put it out, and then it immediately starts again. It's like, for Christ's sake, and then you put it out again, and then it immediately starts again. It's like,
You must play those games very differently to me, Scruffy.
yeah, maybe that's why I don't really like those games very much as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was gonna say 'cause the reason I was pointing that out was because I know that you don't like those firefighty co-op games.
Yeah, yeah,
I think the one you probably like the most is maybe Spirit Island, and even that is a game that we're like famous for not being super positive on. So
yeah, yeah. No,
yeah,
you're right. I think maybe maybe it's just a mechanical concept that kind of frustrates me. I don't like backtracking. I don't like having to redo the same thing I've done again. I don't like miss turns and counter spells in games at all. But it's a perfectly valid mechanic, and if you get joy from playing games with those mechanics in, then that's
it's
fantastic.
interesting though because I never felt like I don't like miss a turns. Obviously, who likes missing a turn? But when you describe them that way, I think okay, well, I think that's a fair description. But before you described them that way, I would have never have used those words. It didn't once cross my mind. I don't know why I was okay with it. I guess
Mm,
because I was so happy with the rest of the system.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's very very interesting. Very very interesting.
So just going back to the kind of immersion thing. Sorry to
No no no. I derailed the conversation.
yeah,
Let's
that
go
was it
back
was a really
to
cool tangent. But I just wanted to just go a bit deeper into that and in war games in general because it's an interesting thing. I had a very similar experience playing this to playing Silent Victory, which is the
Mhm.
other sort of war game I've played. And I think it is just this style of game that maybe just war games in general aren't for me. Like they feel like they take you on a journey. You show up, you say where you want to go, and then you ask them, "Do I get to do that?" And then they tell you yes or no, and that's kind of it for the whole game. Like it's never that you kind of in the game you sort of plant your seeds for plans and then see them come to fruition with some random mechanical interactions. It is that you plant your seeds and they just might not grow, or they'll grow into massive giant trees and you win the game and well done you. But you've done nothing different. You plant the seeds exactly the same in the war games. The choice you make is exactly the same, and then success or failure is completely up to the dice, up to the cards falling in the right order. It's not ever that you make really can have the space to make the wrong tactical decision or have the wrong strategy going in because it's so dependent on this chaos. So yeah, I think that's what I mean when I say it's too chaotic. That you
I wonder how much of that is true, or how much of that is just the impression or the feeling that you got because you didn't appreciate
well,
the
I
level of
think
chaos.
I think it's objectively true because you are left like, let's say the way you wipe out the tribes, when you make them surrender, it's theoretically impossible to win this game if you roll badly every time.
Mhm.
That's not just like vague theoretical. You could probably mathematically determine how many rolls you can have, even if everything else goes right. How many rolls you can have at each of the tribes on their home tile, and then you either succeed or you don't with that amount of rolls.
Maybe, for sure. But, what I don't agree with is that, there's not enough depth for you to not have the right strategy.
Okay.
or not have the right tactics. There are crunchy decisions to make in the game, and I think they will be influenced turn to turn. It's a very, I said, the movement isn't tactical like other war games, but it is a very tactical game by nature because you're always reacting to the latest piece of randomness. But there is, whenever you do have a decision to make, there is always multiple choices on how you can spend the card. Even on the most basic cards, the action cards, there are still multiple choices, and multiple valid choices. Often, do I
Mm.
do I concentrate on this tribe here, because that's where my forces are and that's what I wanted to do at the start of the round, or do I react to what has just happened by the barbarians turn, actually look at the Marcomanni tribe who are really kicking my butt at the moment. And that's a very basic decision, but those kind of small tactical decisions are baked into the game. You won't know the right answer because of the chaos of the dice and the chaos of the cards, etc. And I appreciate that. But what I don't agree with is that it's impossible to make wrong decisions because they're all so basic and uninteresting. I think it's actually a game that makes you make really interesting decisions. One part that makes them very interesting is the level of chaos, in that you'll stress over these decisions and you won't know if it's the right one until you see what comes next. I think that's a part of its charm, personally.
Yeah, I mean that's a absolutely totally valid way to see it, and I can totally see where you're coming from with that. Yeah, I think for me it just gets boiled down to the modifiers, like I say. So
Yeah,
when you were
sure.
giving that example there, let's say you were planning on taking out the
I was about to say the Iceni, but I'm talking about coin tribe, aren't
no,
I?
let's say you were planning on taking out the Iazyges, and then suddenly the Quadi come forward and they start getting a bit scary, a bit close to Rome. Well, now you sit there and you go, okay, first question, did I, because there was no way to account for the Quadi doing this, they just did it. They just had three cards came up, they shot down. Okay, so was I lucky enough to, at the start of the round, have my off army in that space? Or did I only put like one legion in there? So there's no choice if I've done that. I did, brilliant. Okay, so that means I could, instead of attacking the Iazyges where I was going to fight, I could fight the Quadi, but now I'm getting a -2 for that fight. Okay, so is that really worth it? Well, maybe I could invest some cards to give myself a +1, and that's the kind of decision space you have there. I didn't find that to be a very interesting or fun decision space
Yeah.
personally.
No, I did, because even if you go back further and say, well, is that where I left my other army? And, spoiler, I do think there is some good sense to actually split them kind of evenly in some cases, but not always. And that's a part of that really fun decision space as well, of who, I don't know who's going to move. How much do I move my army? How confident am I in my own ability to, if I just put it on these two tribes and ignore the third, am I confident enough that I'm going to be able to achieve everything I want to with those two? And again, like I said earlier, you won't know until much later,
Mm,
when the barbarians get to act. And I think that's like I said, I think that's part of the charm.
yeah.
But yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. I totally get it. And I kind of knew before even giving you the game that it was going to be a bit of a long shot for you to enjoy this, because I
That's
know
it.
the type of games you like and don't like.
I think it's also, in terms of that sort of strategy, for me, I realized quite early on, if we want to get into the specifics, that you only really need to have armies in a place you want to push them back in, right?
Yeah,
That's the
sure.
only reason to have an army in a place. If you want to just stop them from moving into Rome, all you actually need to do is build forts, because you can counteract their movement by having a fort there, and instead of them moving, they'll knock your fort down a level. So you can just spend cards to make them miss turns on moving down towards Rome, and you don't have to worry about having an army anywhere near them. And when I realized that, it kind of, yeah, it made that decision of, I basically never attacked with my second army. I only ever attacked my army that had the +3 leader in it, because I needed that extra modifier, and the spending a card to move that leader to another place could have just as easily be spent on getting a fort put there,
Yeah, I think that's valid.
and it does the same thing and more.
Thank you for the
And
strategy tips.
yeah, so some pro strategy tips for you there. But I realized that on my first game, and it made the decision space for me just kind of shrink right down. And so I just played every turn almost like an AI. Like just I had just a sort of playbook way I did things every turn, every round. And the only difference was I either succeeded or I didn't. And whether I did or didn't wasn't really up to me. And so it just felt like I was this robot going in, bleep bloop, try and do the thing, did it, great. Didn't do it, oh, next turn, bleep bloop, try and do the thing. It just felt so repetitive. And like I say, Sisyphus rolling his boulder every turn, just and yeah, that was the experience for me for sure. And it was the same with Silent Victory, exactly the same sort of feeling.
Maybe the decision space feels broader for me because I'm not as good as at the game as you, Scruffy.
Well, I'm just too good. I'm just too good for
Maybe
my
this is
own.
the case where ignorance is bliss, you know?
Well, maybe. But I think that goes to because these. I don't know if you call them exploits or what are things that I was able to kind of hone in on so quickly. It goes to that thing I said before of sloppy design or kind of just immature design, game design that feels like it belongs in games from a yesteryear, long forgotten, when I'm used to such a, and I think as board games we are used to such a intensely high quality of mechanical standards in games, that things are so nuanced and well balanced that you'd have to be a rocket scientist to work out how to break them a lot of the time. Even games that are a bit rough around the edges, they have clear design thought and processes that have mechanics bounce off each other and interact with each other in a way that keeps things tight, interesting, crunchy, and unexpected.
Yeah.
Whereas in this game, it felt like stepping down from playing a really complicated tactical game to just literally rolling dice randomly and hoping for the best, playing snakes and
See,
ladders.
I think this is really indicative of where I am in my board game journey as well.
Uh-huh.
Because you're absolutely right. If you compare it to like a modern Euro game, it's not a perfect balance design. It can break, it can have weird swingy moments. For me, that makes it. For me, the simulation, the
Mm.
charm of the theme, and the decision space that is interesting enough for me. And I will grant to you that there are some strategies that I do feel are a bit prescribed. Specifically, I will always make the same tribe surrender. I won't say it on the podcast in case people want to play the game and discover that themselves. But I do agree with some of the points you're making. But I think it's really indicative of where I am that there are so many lovely, well balanced, inoffensive modern Euro games. And are they exciting? Kinda. You know?
You just want
Is it?
something different, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think I think you're right to say that it's. I think it feels like a completely different design space. It feels like
Yes.
almost as different from playing a Euro game or a general board game as playing an RP has felt from playing one
Yeah,
because
and I think people who are used to playing war games will be like, "Oh, listen to these 2, knuckleheads," War games are all designed like this, that's how they all feel.
So, I mean, as a war game on a war games merit, from my limited experience, I can say, and I'm sure you can talk more on this, but I can say that it works really well as a war game. I just don't think I like war games.
I think that's kind of what it boils down to, doesn't it? I think that's what it
Yeah,
boils down to because what it is essentially is a very thematic, interesting, swingy and exciting, accessible
yeah,
war game that can be played in about 45 minutes. I think. It didn't take me much longer to play. I don't know about yourself, Scruffy.
no,
No, not at all. I think it's a wonderful design. I think it looks great on the table. I think you probably have something to say about that in a moment. But I think it looks great on the table. It's wonderfully thematic. It really, really makes me smile every time I play it. I find all of it interesting and exciting, and it plays in 45 minutes. I think it's a fantastic game, and I think it accomplishes a lot in a very small box. But yeah, that's my thoughts. It's
yeah.
sort of summed up in a neat little parcel. Do you want? Should we spend a little bit of time on? I feel like people who've played Holland Spiel games before will know what comes in the box.
Mhm.
But for people who haven't, do we want to come sort of cover sort of what to expect because this is very different to ordering something of a similar price point. This is in a similar price range to like Lost Ruins of Arnak, for example.
Wow.
This is like a £40 game.
So, I mean, I'm not a follower of Hollenspiel games. I'm not really at all kind of familiar, so I wouldn't be able to compare it to other games or give you any sort of insider insight there. From a kind of layman's perspective, from somebody who doesn't play war games, doesn't play many games of this kind of ilk, I would describe it for the casual listener as it looks like somebody's printed it out at home and folded it up awkwardly and stuffed it in a box. The card quality is really cheap. The components look like they aren't, but they look like little plastic or cardboard squares. Even the dice are just lackluster and tiny and a bit depressing. The graphic design on the things, it doesn't make me happy. The little tiny men with the shields on a giant purple background for no reason. The distinctions between the things on the colors doesn't look pleasing to me. I feel like it is of an aesthetic that I recognize from seeing other games in shops, but those are games that I ignore because they don't do
Yeah,
it for me.
I feel like this is like this episode is turned into Eurogamer reacts to indie war game.
Eurogamer has his mind blown by
Welcome to our live reaction.
yeah,
So,
and I feel like it's it's going to be an opinion that makes me unpopular, but I can't lie. It's how I feel when I see these things. It's the way they make me feel.
so for those of you familiar with Hollenspiel or follow Hollenspiel, who I think are a great publisher, and Mary and Tom who run the company, I think I followed their podcast for a while. I think they're lovely people, and Tom is one of my favorite board game designers in general. So with that out of the way, I think if you're used to sort of getting Lost Ruins of Arnak for about 40 quid, then this will come as a shock to you because it arrives in what is essentially a very, very small thin box. It is a paper map, and I mean a paper map. I'm not like being funny or snarky there. The map is made of paper.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very good quality paper, and I think the art is nice, and it looks like you're looking at this ancient map that goes very well with the theme. And the cards are like plastic cards, and you're right, Scruffy. The dice are very small, and I did think a little bit uninspiring because you're always rolling one dice for the Romans, one dice for the barbarians. Why not just make them two different colors? They're the
Right.
same color, right? So that was a little bit disappointing.
It's not very good attention to details, and apologies to the. I don't know anything about the people behind this, and if it's a small independent thing, then awesome. And it sucks that I'm so spoiled by the big industry boxes.
Yeah, look at you, Scruffy.
I'm a sellout. I'm a corporate sellout.
The
Let's face
corporate
it.
sellout.
It sucks. But it's it's how it makes me feel now. Is when I see this stuff. I feel like as well, just on a personal level, I've tried tooling around with board game designs and things, and it's not my aesthetic. It's not how I would
No.
want to see it. The font choices, the layouts, the colors, the kind of muted colors, and I get that it's not for me. And this is the thing as well, because it rubs me the wrong way on both things. Like, I like really garish, silly, immature color palettes and designs. I like things to be vibrant and popping and cool and exciting because I've got a child brain in that way. And I think on this way, it's too mature for me. It's drab and mature.
And then you find the design too swingy and wild.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like it's the worst of both worlds. Like, yeah,
See, I'm on the complete opposite
yeah.
aesthetically, and I think we talk about themes that interest us in games quite a
Mhm.
lot, and we're always astounded at how different we are when it comes to board game themes that interest us. We both like 18xx games, but you like it in spite of the theme, whereas I
Yes.
got into it because of the theme. I love trains.
Yeah, and it's the same with the sort of design aesthetic of 18xx games. There's a few of
Yes,
them, like 89, where some of the colors kind of are
that was
nice and
you're
pleasing.
talking about a fan-made variant, though.
Yeah, nice and
Actual original
pleasing. And
by Deep Thought Games is very much like everything else you've seen.
there you go.
No, well, what's yeah, and we were talking about one of my favorite games, one of my favorite multiplayer games, Power Grid, the other day, and Scruffy, you're not a big fan of that game either, but you were talking about how the theme is uninteresting, and I was so shocked. I was like, how is a theme the thing that doesn't interest you? Like powering cities, that's so much fun. That's awesome. And you're just
If
like,
any of you haven't played the game and have a computer to hand now, just Google it and look at the box art, and you'll.
well, that whole aesthetic is just wonderful to me. And yeah, we're very different when it comes to theming and aesthetics in board games. And the solo games we played so far, we've not had something this probably divisive before. We've disagreed before, but not probably this divisive. This is a game that is designed specifically for somebody like myself with the kind of themes that I enjoy and the kind of aesthetic that I like, and definitely not someone like you. So I think
Yeah.
I've had a blast just listening to you tear apart one of my favorite
And do you
games.
know, it's been really interesting because I came into this just genuinely not understanding how anyone could like it, and you've illuminated it for me there. It's been really interesting. Some things I've had to be like, yeah, that's totally fair enough. It's funny how we can just be two sides of the same coin, play the same game and have a completely different feeling about it,
Yeah, it's cool.
even though it's mechanically and performatively the same thing that we're doing, just coming away feeling so different. It's really exciting. I love this hobby, dude.
Yeah, it's awesome, and so much of it has just come down to our own personal differences,
Yeah.
which is wonderful, and it goes to show that it really is a game for everyone.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how much I like Hollandspiel as a publisher, and I know this game wasn't designed by Tom Russell, but she's one of my favorite designers in general. So yeah, have the chance to support their company by buying, playing, and doing an episode about one of their games is great for me. I'm in my element at the moment. I'm sorry to hear you didn't have a good time, but I think it's made for a really fun episode.
Yeah, and I can only apologize for not getting on with it. It's
Hey, dude,
just,
it's totally fine.
but I would totally support you guys checking out the company and supporting independent businesses.
Yeah, and I feel like with these indie games, you do get, well, with these indie companies, you do get, board games that are more niche, that do feel completely at odds with whatever is going on in the mainstream. And I think that is something that is totally rad and totally something to check out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool to have these new experiences because you don't know if you're going to like it until you try it. You don't know if you're a Norm or a Scruffy until you've given this stuff a go and expanded your horizons in this way. Now, I'm really glad that I've had the experience of playing this game now because it's kind of cemented once and for all my tastes and made me understand what I like about a game on another level, and what maybe
Give it a
doesn't
few
work for me.
months, and I'll twist your arm into playing another war game.
And I will, and I'll be like, this is the one that I like, and this is why it doesn't work for the others. It's nice to have this kind of baseline of experiences of different games. I love it.
Cool.
Well, I
I
think
think that's probably
that's
enough.
yeah. I was about to say, I think that's all I needed to complain about this game.
Should we do the listener questions now, Scruffy?
Yeah, let's do that. So here we are. It's been a month, and we've had loads of responses. I haven't read them, but I clicked on our Discord on the listener questions things just to see if we'd had any responses, and I couldn't scroll to the bottom. It was too many.
We've had quite a few emails in as well. We might have to do a top 5 responses.
Yeah. So the question we asked in the last episode was,
What is your top 5 solo board games of all time?
and we, like I say, had a bunch of responses. So I don't know if we'll get around to all of them today. Sorry about that in advance.
We have had a whole host. What I will say is most of them are on our Discord. So if you are really
Yes.
interested to read all of them, then go onto our Discord, because that's the part where you can actually react to these people's lists as well as look at them. So yeah, please go on to that. But we'll just go through, like 4 or 5 now.
Yeah, and just following on from that, it's never too late to reply and ask people about their lists and stuff. Don't worry that they were said however long ago. People on our Discord are awesome at checking the responses, and it's just a fantastic place to find ideas for new games to play. If you're interested in seeing some suggestions for solo board games you might not have heard about. So the question, like we said, was, what are your top 5 solo games? Do you want to start with one of the emails, Norm? Because nobody will have seen that.
Yeah, we've had a really interesting email from somebody called Jack, who says, "Greetings from across the pond in USA, Ohio." Yeah, greetings. We have a lot of US based listeners. I think it's the most listened to. I think it's the country with our most listeners. Anchor tells us it is anyway by quite a long way, and if even if Anchor didn't tell us that, we would know from the Discord.
And in planning phase, we'll often explain English things from the UK.
Yeah, it's really fun to be like, okay, so our next holiday is Pancake Day. What on earth is that? But anyway, yeah, greetings from USA. I adore the podcast, gents. Great chemistry, content, and insights. Well, thank you. They say I'm a long time gamer, both RPG, board games, and video games. Up until a couple of years ago, all of my solo gaming experiences have been through video games. Unfortunately, video games have been losing their luster. I've been exploring solo board games and RPGs for a couple of years, but tend to run headlong into the freeze up at play issues that you've both spoken about.
Hmm.
The rules, the setup, etc. But then I feel like I don't know how to start. I end up going back to video games and feeling unsatisfied. This led me to have a few questions for you two, which I'm not going to read now. I'll get back to them if we have enough time at the end of the episode. They've gone on to answer our questions. So their top five, number five, Mage Knight. And that's because they've only managed a few games because of the time to learn the rules, which I understand.
For sure.
Number four, Fleet the Dice Game. Number three, A Feast for Odin. Number two, they've just done a catch-all for RPGs. They enjoy Starforged and D&D 5th edition with the Solo Adventurer's Handbook and Mythic GM Emulator. And
Ah,
number one, Marvel Champions. Wow, there's a
good
lot to unpack
choices.
there.
Good choices. Yeah, and I've not tried D&D, and
Solo, you mean? You have played
oh
D&D.
yes, I've not tried D&D solo. I've not tried D&D solo with the solo supplement and the Mythic Jimmy. I think I had a bit of a look at it. D&D's never really appealed to me as a system. If I wanted to go kind of more fantasy, obviously I'd be tempted to go for Ironsworn, or I've been learning Forbidden Lands lately. That's very exciting. But yeah, Starforge for sure, as you know, one of my all-time favorites, and some other really good ones in there. The only one I haven't heard of is Fleet. Have you heard of Fleet?
Yeah, Fleet.
Oh no, I have heard of it. It was mentioned in a previous listener questions, I believe.
Yeah, Fleet the Dice Game is very, very popular. The actual little dice that they use are similar in sort of design or production to the source dice from Mage Knight. They look very sort of similar, so that's quite cool. Or maybe it's just me who notices that because I'm Mage Knight obsessed. But yeah, Fleet the Dice Game looks like a whole bunch of fun. I've seen numerous people who say they love it. So yeah, I'd be happy to give that a go one day for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at the dice now, and I completely agree. I see what you mean. Except they've got fish on them, so they are superior to the Mage Knight. Right, let's have one from our Discord here. So the first response we had on our Discord was from Marshwiggle, who says, "I make a top 10 every year. At the end of 2020, my list was, and this is just the top five. Number five, we have Star Trek Frontiers, which is a remake of Mage Knight, for anyone who doesn't know. And then we have at number four, Pax Porfiriana. At number three, we have Pax Pamir. At number two, we have 1862 Railway Mania in the Eastern countries,
Counties.
in the Eastern counties. Thank you, Norm. And at number one, we have Navajo Wars.
Yeah, a couple of really interesting ones there. I think Marshwiggle was more of a Norm and Scruffy from those.
Yeah, I'm getting that impression there. An 18xx game appearing in one of their solo lists.
And a GMT war game at number one.
Yeah, GMT Wargame number. Very much a your side of the thing. Maybe they're listening to this episode as well. Sorry for my awful opinion on war games, Marshwiggle.
Excellent. The next top five we had was from Stickman Sai, who says at number five it was Mistfall.
Mm-hmm.
At number four, Mage Knight. Number three, After the Virus. Number two, Forbidden Island. And number one, Aeon's End. And they've also hinted that they've made a campaign, a campaign for Aeon's End, which I'm actually going to go ahead and link in the description because it is available for you to download on Board Game Geek. So we're going to include the link to that in the description, which is pretty cool. A lot to go over there on this list. Mistfall actually is something that another listener mentioned in one of our previous listener questions. I don't know if it got read out on the show. It was Pickles who mentioned it. And then Stickman Sai mentioned Mistfall as well. And they both spoke about it so highly I've went out and actually purchased the game already. So yeah, I'll let you know if that one's any good once I get around to it.
Yeah, so Mistfall, that's super exciting. Maybe something to look at for a future episode,
You
if you'll
never
let me
know.
borrow it.
After the
And
virus sounds very relevant.
yeah, indeed, After the Virus looks like a zombie apocalypse game with some cool cartoony graphics there. Nice, light, chill, fun one. Let's look at Rob the Game Guy's list. I'm going to rattle through these now. We've got number 5, Scythe. Interesting for solo. Number 4, Aeon's End Legacy again. 3, Feast Rodin again. 4, 2, Mage Knight. And 1, Seventh Continent. Yeah, clearly someone who likes filing cabinets, right now.
Just like you, Scruffy.
Lovely. Good choices. Great list. I love it. And Scythe is a fantastic game. I just, no, I've never played it solo yet.
I'd be interested to know what you think because I think you assume that you're not going to like it.
Yeah,
But,
I do.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
like the digital version. I just find it too easy.
Okay, Tigmig said that number 5 was Under Falling Skies. Number 4 is Aeon's End Legacy. Number 3 is Mage Knight. Number 2 is A Feast for Odin. And number 1 is Spirit Island. So only 2 unique ones on that one, Spirit Island and Under Falling Skies. What do we think of those ones, Scruffy?
Yeah, I'm surprised Tigmic's still listening and following after all the horrible things about we say about their favorite game. But
Well, we don't actually say that many bad things about the Spirit
no,
Island.
it's just kind of a running joke, isn't it? You know? But yeah, great list. Yeah, totally valid. I can see all of those. Nice to see Under the Falling Skies getting some love. We covered that in an episode a while ago. It's a nice little print and play.
Excellent. Well, so Johnny Floated did the next one, and they actually have 4 unique games on the list that we haven't seen crop up on
Ooh.
anyone else's yet, so that's cool. And they have a number 5, Detective, and number 4, Raiders of Scythia, and number 3, Gaia Project, and number 2, Sleeping Gods, and number 1, Seventh Continent. You can tell what kind of games Johnny likes because 2 and 1 are like similar exploration and adventure type games. I don't know if you've heard of or played any of the others there, Scruffy.
Well, Gaia Project obviously is kind of the successor to Terra Mystica, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so another kind of game about shaping a world and exploring a world in some ways. I can see the kind of tie-ins there, but a lot more of a strategical sort of battle territory control type game. I really like Terra Mystica, actually. I've never played Gaia Project yet. I don't know the other two very well at
Raiders
all.
of Scythia is quite new. It looks very well regarded for solo, so potentially one for us to look into. There's a few games on these lists that are really exciting to me that I've not played before, and that's definitely one of them.
Well, let's have Stop Somewhere Eric's completely unique list here. None of these games have been mentioned. We've got at number 5, Parks. Number 4, Coffee Roaster, with the corrected beans, apparently. Number 3, Cartographers. Number 2, Palm Island. And number 1, It's a Wonderful World.
That's a reference to the fact that the most recent printing of Coffee Roaster came with incorrect beans printed incorrectly, and
Oh, yeah.
Stop Somewhere. Eric had to correct them themselves. So yeah, it's just a bit of a pain, that one. But yeah, a good list there. Palm Island one I haven't played or owned, but I do own a couple of games by the same publisher, Button Shy. They're very interesting, Scruffy. All their games come in like little wallets that fit into your pocket.
Yeah, I think I might have seen those.
Yeah, Dan, who's been on a couple of episodes before with us, he turned me on to them, and yeah, they're pretty neat.
I think that's where I'll have seen them. I'm looking at It's a Wonderful World now. I've never seen this game before, but it looks beautiful. The cubes, the sort of theme, it looks really interesting. Kind of giving me shades of Terraforming Mars there with some of the card design and the symbols and the iconography
Yes,
on that. Do
from
you know
my
anything?
understanding, it is an engine builder as well, much like
Brilliant. Yeah,
Terraforming
yeah.
Mars.
Oh, I haven't played a good engine builder in a little while. I think that would be something I might try out on the old tabletop sim if I can find a table for it.
I'm exactly the same as you, Scruffy. It's been a while since I've played a good engine builder. I think the last pure engine builder I played is Wingspan. So it's been a very long time since I played a good engine builder.
Yeah. I'm going to do this next one as well because I've got it up and it's from Dog Mantra, who's obviously been on our episodes before, Kendall. And they say their number 5 is Clans of Caledonia, which we did an episode on. Number 4, they've got Mage Knight as Krang. 3, Mage Knight as Wolfhawk. 2, Mage Knight as Goldix. And number 1, Mage Knight as Norowas. So I think that's a pretty good list, except they've got the Mage Knights in the wrong order there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Tovak. Where's Tovak and where's Arafia?
Exactly. Tovak should be number 1.
Okay. I think that we've gone through a lot of lists, and I think we're now just sounding like we're just rattling through a bunch of games. And
yeah, and like Norm says, that you can see the rest. There are tons more. Just scrolling down here, there's just tons more on our Discord. Really great recommendations. Some games I've heard of, some games I've never heard of. I didn't know Castles of Burgundy had a solo mode. That's
yeah, so
stuff like that. If you're interested, come join our Discord and check it out. We don't mind people lurking. We don't mind people who don't want to chat. Welcome to join in, look through the channels, and just see what's going on. It's a really great community.
just on Castles of Burgundy, the reason I don't have a solo mode is because I have the original version of the game. The new deluxe version comes with a solo mode as standard, whereas the old one had a solo map expansion, which is basically really hard to get hold of now. I'm very tempted just to print and play the solo map now, because I don't know if it's worth me picking up the deluxe version just for one piece of card that I need for solo play, basically. But that's where I am. That's where I am with it. Just going back to Jack's email, they've asked 3 questions here regarding barriers to entry for solo games.
Okay.
And do we have enough time to answer?
Yeah, let's answer those. That'd be a nice way to end the episode.
Okay, so the first one they said is because they've experienced some barriers to entry with solo gaming, which we've discussed before and totally sympathise with. They said they have a few questions for us. So the first one is, how often do you play solo tabletop games? Is it sort of daily, every other day, weekly? How often is that? So Scruffy, you go first.
Yeah, I think on average, I like to play games a lot for the show, and I bounce between solo RPs and solo board games, and occasionally, if you include tabletop sim in there as well, I would say I probably play maybe every other day, maybe a bit less than that lately, but about every other day for me.
Yeah, for me, obviously, you got to find the right balance, and you got to juggle a full-time job with social commitments, and
It varies quite wildly week to week. I think it's
for sure. And obviously, a partner and social obligations, etc. For me, normally, I try to give myself an allowance of two days a week. I'll play a solo game, and you think that might not sound like a lot, but 2 nights a week plus recording the show. But back when we were doing it every 2 weeks, and then the planning phase as well every 2 weeks, meant that it was 3 nights a week would be dedicated to solo gaming one way or the other, whether I'm talking about it or playing.
Yeah, I think I'm also including prep in that, like reading rule books and making characters, or brainstorming scenes for an RP, things like that. So it kind of it includes quite a wide scope. When I talk about my play, it's like not necessarily sitting down and playing a board game every other day, but
yeah. So 2 nights a week, and that doesn't mean 2 plays. It's often multiple plays. It's often, especially if it's for the show, which it obviously is at the moment, all just for the show. Much less now that we've moved to the 4-week or once a month format, I should say. But yeah, when we were doing a 2-week format, it was twice a week and multiple plays during those 2 nights. Sometimes quite a lot of plays, because you got to really cram.
Well, or you get kind of just excited to play it again, like a lot of the games we've done for the show.
Absolutely. Especially for playing a game with like lots of variables. So like if we don't cover every faction in a game, for example, one criticism I might lay out for a game, a listener will automatically bat it back with, "Oh, you clearly didn't play this faction." So when we're prepping for the show, you have to really sort of cover all angles in terms of prep, which sometimes is great fun, other times is a bit of a chore. But
yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, obviously, with the podcast, we've definitely ramped up how often we play and how much we play. Before the podcast, definitely wouldn't have played. Well, I mean, I wasn't really into solo gaming, but if it wasn't for the podcast, I imagine I would play a lot less, because it's like Jack said in their email. Sometimes it just feels easier just to fall into a video game, and that might not be as fulfilling, and it's a shame that that's the case, or watch something, but it's kind of a symptom of modern life, isn't it? That games that take energy and that actually satisfy you and make you feel the most levels of happiness and the most levels of fun, I feel like a bit more of a commitment.
Yeah, for sure. Prior to the podcast, I would say, about if I did it once a week, that would be pretty good. So sometimes less. Although prior to the podcast, it wasn't a pandemic, so I was gaming with my gaming group
Yes, yeah, that's true.
twice a
That's true.
week.
Yeah, we definitely did a lot more multiplayer games.
Then the next question they had is, do you have a selection of games you like to play when you have less than sort of 30 minutes or 60 minutes, shorter games? Can we give me sort of two recommendations for games that are less than 30 minutes?
Oh gosh, well, I tend to play long, involved, complicated games. Like I like to play really deep ones. My go-to games, if I just really want to play something quick and easy, always Railway Station.
Hmm.
Number one, like I can play that really quickly, and I really enjoy playing it quickly. So that's number one. What else? Do you know, I actually can't think of another one that comes to mind off the top of my head. I haven't played a short game in so long. I've been, so fixated on all these massive, big
Coin
projects.
Tribes, Ming Voyages, Under
If
Fallen
I,
Skies.
yeah, I mean, I haven't played any of them really. If I have a spare 30 minutes, it will just be a little bit of prep for my next big RP session, or a little bit of tweaking with characters, or learning some rules, setting up, prepping some scenes. It will just be RP prep, as opposed to playing a game, like I say, in terms of a full game.
Okay, I have a few. Normally, I'm thinking about the reason Jack asked this question because if I've got enough time to play a game, I normally have more than half an hour. So why would I play a game that lasts that amount of time? It's normally because those short games don't require as much of my headspace, right? They don't
Right.
require as much thinking. So I'm going to answer from that sort of perspective. When I'm feeling that way, I really like to play an Irem. I love, for me, people often criticize an Irem because there's a lot of card shuffling. For me, I think that's the point. Like an Irem is built for people who like handling cards. And for me, when I'm like bored, or even at work, I have a deck of cards on my desk, and I'm often just shuffling a deck of cards, riffle shuffling a deck of cards, or cutting a deck of cards, or just handling a deck of cards is really satisfying to me. And playing a Nyrim gives meaning to that. It's basically just handling cards for 30 minutes, but there's meaning behind it. And there's not that many meaningful decisions to make, but that's, I think, a bonus when you're in that kind of headspace of I can't really be bothered to play anything. So an Irem is a really great recommendation for that if you're anything like me. On a similar vein, I also quite like to play Ganz Clever. It's a roll and write, which doesn't really require too much thinking, to be perfectly honest, but has some really nice combinations and combination scoring. We likened it to Lost Ruins of Arnak in this sort of decision space, but it's much less involved. And it actually has an app which I use quite a lot. So yeah, if I'm not really feeling it, I'll be honest, I can get Game of Ganz Clever done in about 10 minutes on the app, maybe less.
One Deck Dungeon. I knew I was forgetting a game. One Deck Dungeon. I just couldn't remember it. I looked over at my bookshelf and I was like, "What would I play?" One Deck Dungeon. I see it. Yes, that would be the game I'd pick up.
And the final question is, do you have any recommendations for becoming more proficient with Tabletop Simulator?
Yeah, there's some YouTube videos actually done by there's like really short videos, a little series of them if you can find them. I can't remember what I searched for to find them that give you kind of a tutorial. They teach you even some things that not many people know about, like how to look under a card when it's on the table. They're really short and they're really clear. I watched those and my tabletop sim game went up loads. But yeah,
We'll
that'd be
look
what
for
I'd.
them, and if we can find them, we'll pop the link in the description. Okay, that's pretty much everything we got time for. Gosh, we spent so much time with Jack there.
Yeah, well, those are cool questions. So thank you for emailing in, Jack.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the responses, even the ones we didn't get to read out. I hope you understand why, though. There's just so many to get through. This has been a really fun and interesting episode for me. But before we move on, we haven't given a question for this episode. Scruffy, what's the question for today's episode?
So the question for this episode is: what is a game that you like but everyone else in your game group hates?
Yeah, what's something divisive? What's a game that you will always stand up for, but you can't get it to the table because as often as you like, because your gaming group doesn't like it. So not this isn't very solo specific,
Yeah,
but
or it can be a game that is just generally hated. It's got negative reviews, low score on BGG, but it's a gem to you, and you'll champion its cause. For now, if it's a solo game, great. If it's a multiplayer game, that's cool too.
yeah, like Scruffy loves Monopoly, for example.
Yeah, I'm just obsessed with it.
got, honestly, if you walk into his home, it's just full of Monopoly variants.
But
Got
only My Little Pony Monopoly. That's the only one I play.
Yeah, but you collect the
I've
rest
got them
and
all of
only
them.
play My Little Pony.
Only play my. They're all around my walls, like on a big Kallax, all around my house, just full of Monopoly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Good pick.
Yeah, if you like Monopoly, let us know. And yeah, this game's got us thinking about, that sort of that kind of conversation that comes out of that with your friends. That'd be cool to hear if any of you had to try and defend it in your gaming groups. Any stories like that would be awesome to hear. It's been really fun talking with this one. I actually came in really nervous, not sure. I didn't want to ruin the game for Norman. I didn't want to ruin the game for any of you guys listening by pointing out things I don't like about it. But I think having these kind of discussions are really fun, and they can make you love the game even more when you've been like, yeah, I told Scruffy what for.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. I think the reason it was such an easy conversation because everything you didn't like about it was just down to personal preference. There are some things that you said that I couldn't disagree with, like some of the cards are worded poorly, and we gave a really good example of that. I can't disagree with that. It is poorly worded, but a lot of the mechanics you didn't like will be exactly someone else's cup of tea, and they were mine. So yeah, easy chat today. It was really fun to record.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed it. So how can people reach out for the question if they want to answer it?
So if you want to answer the question that we've asked this episode, which again is, what is a game you love, but no one else in your gaming group does? Or what is a game that you have as an absolute gem or a guilty pleasure that is widely hated among the community of gaming snobs?
Yeah. What do they know?
What do they know? If you want to reach out to us, you can do so in a number of ways. You can email us like Jack did. It's alwaysplayer1podcast@gmail.com. You can also reach out on the Discord, which we've mentioned a couple of times. You can just click the link in the description. It's free to join, no strings attached. Just go ahead and do it. You can also reach out on our multiple social media accounts. We're on Reddit, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. It's at Always Play One Podcast on Instagram, and the links to the other two are in the description. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so via our Patreon. We still run our mini-series on there, the Planning Phase. The Planning Phase gives you a whole host of behind-the-scenes goodness, not just about what we're going to be covering during the next episode, but all of our thought process and decision process in picking the next game, and just the general direction of the podcast as well is discussed there.
Yeah, you also get a say in some of our episodes when we throw out the polls. And if you're missing the 2 weekly Norm and Scruffy that you're used to, it's a great way to pick that up because we'll be releasing that 2 weeks after the regular episodes.
Yeah, absolutely, Scruffy. If you were to join our Patreon right now, you'd know no difference. You'd still be getting us every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You can also buy us a cup of coffee. It's ko-fi.com/alwaysplayer1. And the links to our Patreon are in the description. But if you want to hear it now, it's patreon.com/alwaysplayer1 podcast. You can also support us just by doing what you're doing. Continue listening. We love all our listeners. We're eternally grateful that you would switch on the program and get infuriated with our opinions. We love it. But thank you so much for listening. As I said, that's everything for this episode. We'll see you in a month's time for the next episode, unless you're on a Patreon, in which case, catch you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back in a month with another episode of Always Player One. To support the show, check out our Patreon page and our Coffee page. The links to both are in the description. Until then, reach out on Facebook, Instagram, email, or by our Discord to keep the conversation going.